I'm not happy with it anyway, so it's not funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, some lovely stories here, but we'll soon see some beautiful stuff. Let me start off.
You start.
We start, and I'll tell you, it's interesting. We've been saying the ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avot, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And it says in it's got one statement that says, Machloikis, Shehi L'Shem Shemayim, sorry for this kind, a Machloikis, a genuine argument. A genuine, if something is white and you say it's white, and he says black, no, it's white, then they'll prove it in the end, it's the truth. A Machloikis, Sheloi L'Shem Shemayim, we'll come and discuss that in a minute, which is not a genuine and sincere argument, ain't a surface game, will never ever come to a fruition. You know, people, if they want to argue just for the sake of arguing, and we'll see the difference as to what an argument is all about, what you call an argument, okay? That will never ever come. If you've got an argument which is of no purpose, it will never come. So the Pirkei Avos asks, describe an argument which is l'shem shemayim, for the sake of heaven, and describe an argument which is not for the sake of heaven. So he starts off, the machlokes, which is not a genuine one, is the argument of Korach and his congregation. That's what it says. There was 250 of them. All right, they're all fighting. So what was this argument about? They were all arguing, and it should have said the argument between Korach and Moshe. After all, that he's complaining. What's his argument? You'll come in this in a second. I'll go through it with you. That Moshe's picked everything to himself, all for himself. And they had to sort of say, oh, well, let's do it here. He said, if I've got a room full of Sifrei Torah, do I need a mezuzah? And then he said, if I've got a garment which is all blue, this is Rashi, by the way, do I need tzitzis? And of course, they go on, but why is it not an argument between Korach and Moshe? It's an argument between Korach and his congregation. Because in truth, Moshe didn't get involved in the argument. He kept out of it. He said, this is what the Rabbi Shalom has asked, and that's how it's going to stay. Whereas all these other people, 250 of them, you know, every one of them wanted to be the macha. Everybody wanted to be the leader. I don't know if you have the shul politics as well, where everybody comes along. We'll support you, but why are they supporting him? Because they want a position as well. So the machlokes, which is a genuine one, is the machlokes, the argument of Korach and his congregation. Whereas the machlokes, which was genuine, was Shammai and Hillel. Now, if you look through the Gemara, what does the Gemara always argue? It says Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Each one had their own academy. And therefore, you would find that these academies, if you go to a school, you're the alma mater, as they would call it in Latin, you stand up for it. Even if it's a load of rubbish, you still stand up for that, even though you know you shouldn't be, but you will do it because you feel you have an obligation to stand up. The house of Shammai, the academy of Shammai, and the academy of Hillel would argue for the sake of arguing. If their rabbi says it, we will stick by our rabbi. That's not a genuine argument. Whereas the argument between Hillel and Shammai, they were genuine. These two rabbis would argue together. They were genuine. They were saying this is the way it should be. There was no COVID involved in this, none whatsoever. I'm going to tell you a lovely, lovely story, and it's a very funny story, this. He says, hate on many principles depends on the intellect of the individual. Korach was a cousin of Moshe. Okay, there were four brothers. He was a cousin of Moshe. He was on his own right a brilliant man, no question about it. And he challenged the leadership there. But Moshe wanted to deal with him. He was the leader of 2 million people. Can you imagine it? God chose him as the leader. And he didn't want any arguments. He didn't want complaints. So he said, even if he said to him, he says, with all the insults, he said that even if you will go to, in Bamidbar says, even if we'll take our eyes out, we're not going to go up with you. They would not go. They wanted the Korach to be the leader. He says, I was amazed by the response, the arrogance of these 250 people. What was going on? I found Rabbi Kamenetsky, who writes some beautiful stories, sees the following story. You'll love this story. And don't tell me you've never met this person. There was an individual salesman, And he developed an illness in a small town far from home. And he was prescribed with a cure that entailed him, believe it or not, eating something which wasn't kosher. So what did he do? He was a foreigner in this town, and he wanted to find out whether, in fact, he could eat this tablet. He said, I want to go and speak to the local rabbi, whether, in fact, this is a story. It's a beautiful story. He said, I'll ask the rabbi, Yaska Shaira, can I take this medication? Okay. It's not the first time, by the way, you asked this question. I don't know whether you know this, but if you take gelatine tablets, gelatine actually is treif, but if you can't get anything else, you can actually take them. So he wanted to know his answer. So he went, this poor fellow, he went to see a doctor who was not Jewish. He said to the doctor, look, he said, you prescribed me this stuff. He said, I've always been very cautious. He said, but I'd like to speak to the local rabbi. So he said, well, you'll have to find out, where does the rabbi live? He said, I don't know. He said, but go and speak to the local butcher. So he went to the local kosher butcher. He said, tell me, Rabbi, he says, can you imagine a big guy? He says, where will I find the rabbi? He said, the rabbi? He said, that animal? He said, I wouldn't recommend him to anybody. You said, as far as I'm concerned, he said, he's a nudnik. So do me a favor. I'm sorry. You can't ask me. I can't tell you anything. So he said, you're going to ask him? He said, do me a favor. Don't be daft. So he went, he said, go and ask the chazan. So he went to the chazan's house. He said, excuse me. He says, do you know where the rabbi lives? Shocked. He says, the rabbi? He said, are you mishiga? He said, that rabbi, he said, he's useless. He's absolutely an ignoramus. He won't answer your questions. Can you imagine going to one place to another? The poor rabbi is getting it right, left, and center. So he said to him, he said, look, he said, I can't answer you. So frustrated, he said, he said, go and ask the moil, the local moil. The moil will give you the answer where the rabbi lives. He said, where does the rabbi live? He said, listen, he said, that rabbi, he said, wouldn't know his hand from his feet. Leave me alone. He said, absolutely not. So he said to him, look, he said, if you want to, he said, I'll tell you what, he said, I'll direct you to the rabbi's house. But he said, you're wasting your time. Anyway, he went to the rabbi and he said, Rabbi, he said, I don't understand it. Wherever I went to the butcher, I went to the shoichet, I went to the moil, and they're all insulting you as though you were an absolute ignoramus. Why do you stick it around here? Why do you come here? I came to ask you a question and they're all pushing me off. Why do you stick it around here? He said, well, I'll tell you, he says, he said, the only reason I stay here, he says, is because even although with the insults and the abuse, he says, but a little honor, I don't mind suffering. Worth it. Covered kills everything. Can you hear that? Covered. The other word which I use as well is chutzpah. Chutzpah will answer. That was the problem of Korach. Korach he was a rabble rouser, and he wanted covered. He wanted absolutely, and you'll come along to a word that I'm hearing more and more in the political world, a word I just don't like. The world is called democracy. You'll hear this in a minute. It's a load of rubbish, but you'll hear what it's all about. So he says, for the sake of covered, he says, a person who has got a proper mission, he says, with a vision, he said, that man doesn't interested in covered. Korach was only interested in his covered. He wanted to be the leader of Klal Yisrael against all the other people. And that's why this machloikus, which was not l'shem shamayim, was because they were all after the same covered, every one of them. And you will see this covered is a dangerous thing, a completely dangerous thing, which in fact could affect each and every one of us. I'm going to start now with the son of Korach. Let's look into him. And you'll see, it's an amazing thing, this. Korach gets swallowed up. Why this punishment will go as well. But you see, he says, Moshe and his Torah are true, and I'm a liar. Now, if somebody said that to you, what would you think he's saying? Moshe is telling the truth? No, he said, I'm a liar. I'm telling you lies all the time. He didn't want Moshe to be the leader of Klal Yisrael. And that was another problem. I mean, this Teshuvah will come in on the union of Teshuvah. So let's go and see the Machloikas, B'Shem Shemayim. That was a Machloikas of Moshe and as well, by the way, there was three things, there were three punishments there. You know what the three punishments were? The ground opened it up and swallowed them. The fire consumed them. And then the incense, you remember the incense where the tree grew and beautiful. They planted. That was the incense for the punishment. But then they put in their staffs into the ground, and that grew. And what happened with Aaron's tree, Aaron's staff became a proper tree because it was shkadim. Now I'm Scottish, so I'll use the word almonds. You know what an almond is? A nut. An ALMOND, almond. You better tell it in your Dutch because I can't speak. I speak Scottish. So being a chutzpahniak, but every time I have in my office, we have an automatic answering machine. That woman is going to get the sack. She answers, who do you want? And whatever I say, she just doesn't understand. And she puts me through to goodness knows what. I just don't. You want the dustbin collectors? You want the guy? You want to pay them? It drives me mishigas. Can you understand my English? I hope you do. It's mishiga this. We're all the same. Like, could you just imagine? Interestingly enough, by the way, when you talk about language, where was the first mention of languages in the Torah? You remember? Huh? The Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. They all spoke different languages. Somebody asked for cement in English, and the fellow couldn't understand. He only spoke Danish, and he thought he was insulting him, and he hit him with a brick. There was a lot of fighting. Seriously, have a look and see at the very beginning of the Tower of Babel, where they all spoke different languages. Because you know something, the lesson there was unity, but without uniformity. Can you hear that? Unity, but there was no unity there. There was not even uniformity anymore, but there was no unity there. Here, we've got the 250 people coming along and crying and screaming and shouting. So you can imagine, here he said, is going as follows. So the question is, how did Korach go with this machlokes? Why did he go with it? The second question is, what was the punishment? And the third question is, why did he need the staff at the very end? You got me the question. If he's done it already, he's proven it. So what did he need? He's done it with the ground opening. He's done it with the incense. And now all of a sudden he sticks a staff at the ground and is growing into shkadim. What does he need it for? What's going on here? Why does he need all the proof? No, so let's go as follows. The first thing is, you know, it's an old joke. The woman went into this queue and she wanted to get to the front of the queue. And she said to the woman in front, she says, if you have what I had, you'd let me go in front of you. Oh, I'm so sorry. She let her go till she got to the front of the queue. Everybody was curious. What have you got that none of us have got? She said, chutzpah. And this is what we have here. Chutzpah, cheek, arrogance. I think that's the word you would use in Dutch. Arrogance, yes? Can you imagine some of the arrogance that people have got today? It is unbelievable, the arrogance. I must tell you, not to be political, I am so against all these demonstrations at the moment. It's pure and simple arrogance. Jews for the blacks, the gay rights, and this right and that right. What's happening now is in America, all the Jewish shops are being looted, and even in this country, in London, so the Hasidische Yidden are being stabbed to death. It's gefährlich because it's a chutzpah. It's an absolute chutzpah. They not just they want to be recognized, they want to be the only people who are around. And this is something.
Leak. Alan.
Yes?
It's also a leak of history.
Right.
The knowledge of history. They don't read books anymore. That's the problem.
Well, the truth of the matter is that they can't read. And that's the problem. They can't read. You know, in Gemara language, it's a beautiful language. It's oisius machimius. Letters make you wise. By looking in and seeing something black and white. If I'll say it's black and you'll say it's white, I'll prove it to you. It's written down, it's black. No. He didn't know what he was taught. Einstein didn't know what he was. You know, it's an amazing thing. You're right. Arrogance comes from ignorance. Pure and simple. So therefore, we have to see chinuch is the whole key word here as well. Education. And yet, what's upsetting, Korach was a wealthy man. Korach was a big tzaddik. Korach was no fool. Korach was a clever man. And yet, what did he want? And then interestingly enough, why did he wait till now? When it was all given out at the very beginning, because he didn't want to, you know the expression, he didn't want to rock the boat. And he didn't want to be sounded as a chutzpah. He would wait till the right time in order to come out. Don't you find that as well with somebody with absolute arrogance? They have to wait and then they pounce in. You know, I'm going to tell you something. The more I learn, the more I realize the Torah is a handbook for absolutely everything. Sholem Bayis, correct? Sholem Bayis. In this week's Sedra, there is the most beautiful Sholem Bayis. Let me, I always like when I'm talking to interject with beautiful psukim and everything. You know, Friday night, I don't think I've mentioned this to you. Friday night, we sing Eishes Chayil, correct? In Eishes Chayil. And I want to dedicate this as well to the B'nai Yisrael, the women, because it's beautiful. And Avraham Avinu is coming along and he's praising his wonderful wife, Sarah. He ends with a very strange statement. And that statement says as follows: Sheker hachein, graciousness is false, vehevel hayofi, and beauty is vain. Now, if I went up to my wife and say, you're vain, therefore you're sheker, you know, hevel hayofi is vanity, your beauty is vain, you're actually not beautiful, you're ugly. So can you just imagine what would happen to me? And we don't have any dinner tonight. Or graciousness, you're gracious as my eye. So what we're doing here, is that an insult or is that a praise? Nah, you have to read on. The problem is today, we stop halfway through a sentence. We have to read the whole sentence. And when people, unfortunately, they stop and don't read the whole sentence. What's the sentence? Sheker achein hevel hayofi. Sheker, graciousness is false. Vanity, beauty is vain. Isha. But a woman, it says as follows: Isha Yiras Hashem, who is a God-fearing woman, she, Tisalol, it repeats itself, she will be praised. A double she, can you see it? The word he doesn't need to be in there. It should have just says, Tisalol, she will be praised. Why does it say she will be praised? Because he says, go back again. A God-fearing woman is spirituality. A woman who comes for Shabbos, the covered Shabbos, and dresses herself up the covered Shabbos, what's she doing it for? For vanity. And she's doing it the covered Rabbi Shalom. She's doing it for the covered Shabbos. It's not vain. Humility is not for vanity. Chen, graciousness, is there because it's Tisalol. She's praising a Kodesh Baruch Hu. The tefillah, which we say Friday night when we light the candles, it's the most beautiful prayer. We're actually praising the woman. She deserves to be praised for her beauty. She deserves to be praised for her graciousness. Why? Because she's not doing it out of chutzpah. She's not doing it out of falsehood, out of vanity. She's doing it because she wants to be an avodas Hashem. She wants to serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu to the best of her capabilities. Sneers. We're asking her to cover herself up? No. We're trying to understand that she's actually praising a Kodesh Baruch Hu for her creation. Somebody said to me, it was a bit of a joke, but he said, you know, he says, when the Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world, he created man. But he said, I don't think he was very happy about it. He said, that was the wrong sample. He said, so he decided he'll create the better. So the second sample, he said, he created woman. He said, and that was perfection. He said, he had a second chance, but I don't think that was what it was. But Asa Connector. But can you see how important it is that we understand what vanity is? And what this is here. Here we come along and say the following. It's an illness. Chutzpah is an absolute illness. And I told you the story of Ani off of Ephah. I mentioned that to you, where the Rav, he said he's standing up, the balabos is crying, I did nothing. But when somebody else got an aliyah before him, he went completely berserk. It was chutzpah. He felt that was a chutzpah to him. But what was it? It was just gaiva. It was his chutzpah. To expect that he thinks he's better than everybody else. You see, the Torah is it's actually there as a blueprint as to how we should be living and learning and studying with each other. You know, when you daven in the morning, what do we say? Elu devorim she'ein lahem shir. What is there's no shir? That you got kibud av va'ein. Do you know, I hear this over and over again. You probably hear it. I didn't ask to be born. You've heard that, the chutzpah, you have some children. Oh, yes, I've heard it. I didn't ask to be born. So don't expect me to do you anything. But without them, they wouldn't be here. So what's the bishop? It's a chutzpah. It's a gaiva. It's absolutely gefährlich. And that's why there's so much rebellion in the world today. It's pure and simple chutzpah, nothing else. And we've got to start thinking very, very carefully about this. So let's go on and further here. So the Medrash says he was jealous. Why was he jealous? He was a cousin of Avram, right? He wasn't just anybody in Klal Yisrael. Korach was a cousin, and therefore he felt, why is Aaron getting the creme de la creme as the Kohen Gadol? He said, I'm entitled to it. I'm after all the oldest here, and he wanted to do this. So he couldn't at the time when it was all being given out. He said he appointed his younger brother the youngest brother Elitzophan, who was the son of Uziel. He said he could have objected then. He said, but he couldn't do it because he said at that particular time, he said it was just to say hard luck and not take the side in that matter. So he had to wait. Kol ha'eda kulam kadoshim. He said they're all holy people, so therefore I'll have to wait my turn. So here we come to this horrible word, democracy. Do you hear that in politics? Democracy. I get this all the time in council. And believe me, the next time I go to the meeting and the opposition starts shouting about democracy, interestingly enough, just to tell you about the politics, there's almost 30 conservatives. There's six Labour and 3 Lib Dems. Democracy. There's 9 to 30. That's democracy, that they should have everything. Democracy. You understand how they'll use that word, democracy. He said it sounds as sweet music to the ear of the people. Let me say this to you. How do we get these demonstrations? Now, I was born during the Holocaust, and I get asked all the time, how was Hitler so successful? What was it that Hitler had? That he had a tongue, he had a mouth. It was a mouth. And he spoke about democracy. The Jews are rich. You know how the Arabs are doing it today? The Jews caused the Twin Towers. We were the ones. Every time it's a democracy. We're bigger than them. We're more than them. Democracy, democracy. And it drives me completely round the bend. We're to blame, by the way. We're getting the blame for the pandemic. You know that, don't you? Democracy says they can blame who the heck they like. That's democracy here. But unfortunately, it's hysteria. It's mass hysteria. When you hear that word, and the people who are, unfortunately, I'll use the word uneducated. Can you see the story? Korach repeats itself over and over and over again. It's not a story that happened then. The people, the masses, they thought, we've got a leader who will open up for us. We'll follow him. He's after democracy. He's a leader. And God forbid, he's absolutely not. And I'm going to come to you in a minute to show you how this democracy was the most dangerous thing that ever was created. We can go after the majority. That is how we go. We always went after the majority. Democracy doesn't exist in Judaism. We can't say just because everybody here likes chaza, we should make chaza kosher. That's democracy, isn't it? For the poor chaza, for that poor pig, it's democracy. Let the poor animal be part of it. Yes, please.
Alan, what we say is you can better walk alone in the good direction than follow the crowd in the wrong direction. And that is democracy.
Let me tell you, you say that in the halacha of kashrus, yes? If a chicken is high up and it falls down onto the ground, how do you know it's still kosher and hasn't broken its legs? If it walks. Yes? If it walks properly, it's kosher. What about a duck that swims and it falls? How do you know it's still kosher? And the answer is if it swims. But it's not good swimming with the tide. That is not alive. It could float. That's what you just said. Floating is not living. And that's why it says here, it has to go against the tide of people, right? That's why, by the way, we've got we go here in order to show that you're alive, You have to go against the grain, against the current, against the people. People don't like it. Ugh, why do we do this? Why would, I'll tell you the truth, and I'm finding this more and more and more. The agitators, have a look and see with this pandemic. I use this now because there's so many beautiful examples that actually come along and tell us this. People are coming along and saying, it's late, it's enough now, it's gone. Let's go to shul. Let's pack the shuls out again. Chas v'shalom, chalila. We can't do it, We've got to be prepared. It says that, what do we say here? That the posuk, that, what does it say? I'll come to the posuk in a minute. There's a posuk which actually shows you and actually proves it to you that we have to go against the grain, and then we have to stick. That's the halacha, actually. We don't go according to, because something, children today, the clothes, have you ever noticed the fact that the whole following of the trends? 1 minute the clothes are like this, the next minute the clothes are like that, and people have the children, the youngsters today, even with the internet and everything. It's a horrible thing. This, we have to go. People have to follow the crowd, the mad daft the crowd. Yes, and this is why we say that we have to go against the grain all the time. It's not going and following the madding crowd. It doesn't do anything wrong. Just because you do it doesn't mean to say that I've got to do it. And this is something as well, by the way, that, and I'm going to tell you, and I've always preached this, Pesach time, the Sfardim come to me. Do we have to keep all these traditions and all the old, and they use a word that I don't like using, these nonsenses. Yeah, you hear what I'm saying here, that I've got to run around the table, I've got to take spring onion. I said, do you realize how precious it is that you have got your minhagim that keeps it alive? It makes you absolutely special. Why are you throwing away your own different minhagim? This is why we've got to be so careful. And that's why I say to you that Torah is the best example that I can give to you, that we follow not the madding crowd, but we actually follow the Torah. The halacha is always the safest. And I'll tell you something else, and I say this to you, health-wise, we can't give a reason for lots of things, even with, as I told you, with kashrus. I know you keep an hour between milk and flesh and milk, but that's different halachas. You understand? That's your minhag, and we can't give reasons. It says that by the chukas Torah, this is the statue of the poro aduma, of the red heifer. Everything is a statue. We can't give reasons for everything. We have to follow the reason. Now, Korach thought he'd be clever. Comes along, he says, democracy. He says, look, he says, and how does he do it? He said he's a very, very clever and astute politician. He didn't make a revolt after they came out of Egypt. He kept quiet. Did you notice they all came out together? He had to wait. Because at that time, we were happy to be freed from slavery. He knew nobody would listen to that word democracy because they were all getting. Remember by the Red Sea, by the Yam Suf, everybody got the riches. Everybody got it there. Could you go, if everybody's millionaires, could you go and say, I want to win the lottery? They won it. Everybody won it. There was no point. He had to wait for the golden opportunity for democracy to spring in. When would democracy spring in? When he got and I didn't get. That's democracy. He's driving this Rolls Royce. Why have I got to drive a Mini? That's not democracy. That's jealousy. That's chutzpah. That's jealousy. If it was meant for you, you would get it. Right? Now, so we go on and see the people here.
Can I ask
Please.
Can I
I prefer you to ask. It's good.
Yeah, wasn't not a socialistic approach more like we all the same and we all are holy, so we can all be, anyone can be a leader? Wasn't not a socialistic approach?
That's his approach. No, that was his approach. Not everybody can be a leader. Let me say this. I've always used the following. There has to be unity without uniformity. There has to be a hierarchy. If you remember, when Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe's father-in-law came to him, you remember he said, you're killing yourself. You'll have to appoint judges for bigger problems, smaller problems. Why did he have to do all that? Because he had to show them there was an authority. There had to be a leadership. You can't lead. You can't have everybody being leaders and everybody dictating. There has to be an authority that you have to follow. As far as the Torah was concerned, this is where it goes. Naaseh v'nishma. Naaseh, we're going to do it. We're going to follow it. Nishma, now help me. You remember I told you, we'll first learn to follow, and then we'll understand why we're following and what we're following. It's easy to say we're all born equal. We're not born equal. We're not. Everybody's completely different. Everybody is born. Some people are born into aristocracy. Were you born a queen? Are you a queen or a princess? Or were you married to a prince? Or could you want to be? The answer is no. Let them have the Taurus. I wouldn't want the Taurus here. Seriously. So in other words, what you're saying, the idea is that we're all equal. We're not all equal. You know something? How do we know this? What capabilities have you got that I haven't got? And I make a blessing. Do you know I make a blessing every day? This is something you'll appreciate. There's a brachas we make every morning. Have a look and see. My wife doesn't like them. And she said to me, Dad, I had to explain it over and over again. We make a bracha every morning. Shelo Sani Isha. Thank you, God, you didn't make me a woman. Oh, chutzpah. I'm a man. So I'm better than you. Ah, chutzpah. Shelo Sani God, you didn't make me from the nations of the world. You made me. What's wrong with you? Shelo Sani Eved, I'm not a slave. What am I saying here? The answer is, these are negative brachas, but with a positive meaning. Shelo Sani Isha, you didn't make me a woman, but God, I can't turn around. I wish I could say you made me a man. How many people could stand up and say, I'm a man? How many people could actually stand up and say, you know something? I'm great, I'm good, I'm a real man. How many keep all the mitzvahs that are on the men? How many daven 3 times a day? How many come to that are a man and not on a woman? And also, we've got more mitzvahs than you. Another thing as well, by the way, I wouldn't want to have your problems. Believe me, nature's giving you a headache. I don't need your headache. I don't want to have children. I told you, stop after 1 in my case. It's a fact. We're praising God. Thank you. You gave me an opportunity of being completely different. You made the woman as an Ezer connector, as a helpmate who will oppose me, but who will lead me. And I've told you, the woman is the greatest gift that man was ever given. So understand this. It's a blessing, a negative blessing, because we can't say it positive, because we ain't positive. We can't turn around and say, oh, I'm the greatest. That's chutzpah. That's boasting. You can. Shelo Osani Eved. You didn't make me a slave. Do you know something? What does it mean we're not a slave? We have freedom of choice. What slave has got freedom of choice? That's why when we left Egypt as slaves, we celebrate the fact we were given freedom. But freedom you can only see if you use it properly. Are you a free person? Inga, are you a free person? I bet you're not. I bet you're pound to a penny you're not. Whatever your job is, you think, oh yeah, I've got to finish this. I've got to do that. I can't, I'm sorry. I'm too busy today. I must finish what I've got to do. Do you know, I must tell you a lovely, funny story. I won't say who it was. There's a lady, a family lady. I said, I'll be phoning you tonight at 7:30. Oh, she says, don't do that. She says, I watch the television. There's a program on I watch. I can't miss it. I said, you're a slave to the television. Come on. You're a slave. You're a slave to the computer. You're a slave. You're a slave to your business. Inga, are you still a free person or are you a slave? Tell me the truth now. What are you? A slave.
No, I'm still a free person, but I'm a slave to Hashem.
Yes. Oh, I wish I could say that, because I feel sometimes I feel a slave to the professions, etc. You're 100% correct. That's exactly why we turn on Shelo Osani Eved. You didn't make me a slave because I am a slave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ezehu ben Chayrin. Who is considered a free person? Yes. And how does it come? It's somebody who Cherus. It comes when they said that the 10 Commandments were carved out. Al tikro cherus el chorus. The commandments come and give us. By keeping the commandments, we learn what freedom is all about. It's beautiful. I keep kashrus. I'm a free person. I'm protected from chas v'sholem. Who knows what? Do you understand? This is the beauty of it. So now you understand. Yes, I admire you. You're a free person. You are not a slave. You're a slave to Hashem. Actually, don't be a slave to Hashem, because be an Eved Nemon. Be a proper, genuine individual, an Eved Hashem, being a proper slave. And not, it's a derogatory term. Yes, avodas Hashem. You worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's much more better to serve somebody than actually to do it. Because you know the difference between a slave and a free person? A slave has to do it. A free person does it because he wants to do it. And that's the difference. I want to do the mitzvahs. I'm a free. You know something? Pesach. What do we say? Avodim hayinu lefara. We will say, if we say Shana Hazaus this year, Kulon, we're avodim, we're slaves. Next year will be b'nei chayrim. That's what you'll say at Pesach, correct? Last year we were slaves. This year we're going to be free people. Why are you saying it? Because every single person is a slave to something. Tell me something. Are you very, very careful what you spend your money on? I bet you do. You're a slave to your accountants, because he tells you can only spend so much and you can't give this. You'll ask him, can I give this tzedakah today? Oh, I can't do it this year. I've got to only give so much. Do me a favor. We are all slaves. I promise you. Let's become proper b'nei chayri. This is what he was saying here, and he's coming along and he was saying, listen, we says that with this chutzpah. So he comes along and he says to him, and this is a Ramban. He says he decided. He said he had to wait for the right time when he could attack Moshe and Aaron. So he used chutzpah at that particular time to do it. So here we go. What was the chutzpah? He came along and he said, if I've got a complete garment which is completely blue, what do we say by tzitzes? You take your garment and you have to have cheles, blue threads. So he said, if everything is blue, what do I need blue threads for? If the whole garment is blue. In other words, what he's saying is very clever. If everybody is holy, what do we need all these leaderships for? But what was he saying? A chutzpah. He wanted to be the leader. That was the joke. He wanted to be the leader. He said, and the other thing as well was, he said that was by the mezuzah, but he said, if I've got a house, he said, why did I put on my mezuzah? He says, because you need to put in kedusha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should come into your house. But if I've got a home full of the Sifrei Torah, the whole house is kedusha. What do I need a mezuzah for? Right? So he said that. It was mamish. It was such chutzpah. Can you just imagine this, changing it all completely? So he said as follows. These shilas, he says, that Korach wanted to convey that the whole of Klal Yisrael are kadoshim. Don't bother. We want democracy, he said here. He said the blue color, he said, we want democracy. He said everybody is entitled to it. And he says, if we descend Korach to his argument, he said it was flawed. Why? Because he wanted, on the contrary, he himself wanted to be greater than all the others. Ki hagadol mechaveiro. He says anyone who's greater than someone else possesses a great yetzer hara. He thinks himself such a great person. He said, yeah, it's only the greater the individual, the greater the yetzer hara. You know that? And I'll tell you something else which is scary. The higher the individual, the more punishment there is even for a very, very small thing. If you notice that you should have known better. Have you heard that before? You are the grandfather. You should never have done this. You should have known better. A police officer who gets caught for speeding. You're an officer of the law. You should have known better. The punishment will be even more severe. He should have known better. So he says here that the revolt against was a common sense revolt by Korach. Pure and simple common sense. A philosophy was that no central authority was needed. Only everybody could do it themselves. And since the blue tzitzis, he says, were meant to make everybody kadoshim, what do we need all this leadership for? Very clever, a democracy. But was it democracy? He wanted the leadership. This is the problem. Nobody caught on to this because he himself were wanting the leadership. That's why the argument was Korach v'chol hadosai. That was not l'shem shemai, because every one of them thought, well, Korach will do the fight, but then we'll all fight for the democracy. We'll all want to be the leaders. It's all very well. We'll have a prime minister And then when he becomes prime minister, every one of them thought, we'll all become the people in the government and we'll all get promoted. They were doing it not for him. They were doing it mamish for themselves. That was called democracy, okay? And it's a very, very serious and a very dangerous thing. So the Torah, in Gemara Sanhedrin, it requires that we should have it from the heart and not from our it should be the performance, he says, of the mitzvahs. He says the practice of halacha must be paramount to naaseh. We've got to do it before the nishma. The mitzvah is to do things by naaseh, doing them without having to think, why are we doing them? So Korach was used to scoff Moshe Rabbeinu the whole time. And he was giving this public people all the opportunity to try and say, I'll fight for you. And he wasn't going to fight for him. He was fighting purely and simply for himself. It was a measurement that he was doing. It was not sufficient. The punishment was there. And he was trying to convince everybody. It was only chutzpah there whatsoever. So then we go on to say, that was the first thing. Why did he do that? He did it because of chutzpah. That was the first answer that he did for Klal Yisrael, not for himself. That was the first answer. How did Korach go about with his rebellion? He did it with chutzpah, with democracy. The second, why did Korach get such a punishment? I'm going to tell you. With such a punishment that was going on by Korach, it couldn't just be a case of he was going to be punished and put to death. Something had to happen where if all the rest of the people would see that this was something special, something dangerous. Now we're going to come on to something which I want to tell you, and you will realize why Korach was punished on his own, and this grievance, the pride, the ridicule was terrible. The Medrash says that from under the earth came out the cries of Korach and all his people. He was trying to emphasize, and even when he was emphasized this, he was never ever going to change his attitude, and they had to learn and to listen. He said that Moshe's right, the Torah is right, and I'm a liar. And Echti can talk. Why did he say I'm a liar? This was something here which was not completely necessary. Now we go to the other thing. Why was the test of the staff necessary? Because we're going to come along and say as well, and I'll come to that in a minute. I want to go to you and take to you now something which frightens the life out of me. And here I want to say, ladies, this is for you, for all of you, because the Davdi Paul is for you, for your good Rebbe's and I want to prove it to you, show you something here. So Nageh, it is such a beautiful, beautiful subject. Korach has got somebody here. It says Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhak ben Kos ben Levi, and then it says B'dosam ben Aliov ben Oin ben Peles. Okay, so what's happened here? Something very strange. Oin ben Peles is following the 250, but after the punishment, he's disappeared. Where is he? Do you know the Medrash brings down there and tells us what happened there? It's a Gemara. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Beautiful. It's Kuf Beis to Kuf Aleph. It's a very Kuf Beis to Kuf Yud. It goes right the way here. Kuf Tes to Kuf Yud Aleph. 109 to 110. It says the difference was as follows: that Oin ben Peles was saved by his wife. What happened as follows, and here we have to listen. And here's an amazing thing. The wife went to him and said, Oin, you're a Michiganer. I don't think the Gemara said that, but I'm putting that in. He said, you're mad. Why are you doing this? Why are you running along with Korach? You're not going to be the leader. If it's an argument between you and Moshe, one of you are going to be the leader. You'll never be the leader. So what are you going to be? Another Shamus. So you'll be the Shamus either to Moshe, or you'll be the Shamus either to Korach. You understand what she's trying to protect her husband from? What's the point? Why are you going to succeed? If you want to be the leader, then you're going to be the leader, but you're not. You're going to be the Shamus. You'll be a nothing. So why are you doing it? To which he turned around and he says, what can I do? I made a promise. I promised the leader that I promised Korach I'm going to follow her. So therefore I can't get out of it. So she turned around and she said, don't you worry. I'll deal with it. she says, you just be careful. You go and I'll deal with the whole problem. I'll take the problem. You stay here and I'll save you. So what does she do? Now, this is something very, very scary and something very interesting. Do you remember Hanukkah, how Yehudis saved the world? What did she do? What did they do? What did the sister of the Achashmonaim did? Yeah, but how did she do it? How did she do it? Don't just say she chopped his head off, but how did she do it? She gave him to drink and he fell asleep. All right? Then go on to the prophet. And again, she did it again. What did she do? She got him drunk. This is what, listen to this. She said to Ein ben Peles, have a drink. She gave him drunk. But what did she do? She didn't chop his head off. Oh no, Chalila. It was the exact opposite. She put him to sleep. She fell asleep. She then took off her hair and she sat at the tent. And she kept saying, Kulam Kedoshim, they're all holy people. Why did she say that? What was the point? All she said was, you're drunk, go to bed. Why did she keep rubbing in? Look at the Pasuk. They're all Kedoshim. Why was she emphasizing the same thing that the Kedoshim? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu heard what was going on, she cried. She went on her knees and cried. But she will find out that Korach, she saw, could not get Teshuvah. He had lost it. But the other people were given the opportunity that they could do Teshuvah. She kept saying, Kulam Kedoshim, they're all holy. You have got a golden opportunity to be forgiven for what you have doing. She made them sleep. She didn't come in. The people were Kedoshim. They would not come into a tent where there was sneers. There was a lack of this modesty and humility. She was saving her husband's life. And because of that, his life was saved. He came along and he showed that these people had the opportunity of being able to do Teshuvah. She gained this Teshuvah. An amazing thing, this. Unbelievable. He thought he was stuck. And by the way, again, I'm using Zera Shimshon because I use that as a segula for Klal Yisrael. And you will find as well that Korach comes along, exactly the same thing as you find when Potiphar was listening, when Pharaoh was listening to the spies, to his so-called prophets in Egypt. He says that Ein ben Peles was coming along and saying that the whole congregation, the assembly, were holy. She was explaining to her that the Teshuvah would be there. She knew that this is something which they would be completely forgiven. If they're going to be forgiven, listen, she said. They said, listen to me. You don't have to worry. I'll deal with it. The answer is simple. Moshe wasn't speaking to Korach. Korach was not able to do Teshuvah. He was doing Teshuvah to his wife. Can you see how great the wife is? How the wife can save Klal Yisrael? How women through our history have gone and shown how great we are. Here we come along and teaching us. Ein ben Peles was saved because of his wife. She took that risk and said, don't do it. Don't get on that you can do Teshuvah. An amazing thing. So you see, my friends, although it's a negative command, a completely negative commandment, there still is a positive thing out of the whole thing, that the women are being praised for it. And you know something as well, Korach gets the Sedra, because Korach was called after the Sedra, the same as Balak was called. If certain people get called after the Sedra, not to praise them, but to emphasize to them that we have to listen to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Naaseh, we have to do it, then Nishma. We have to listen to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So, my friends, it's an opportunity.
Hashem told Abraham to listen to Sarah.
Abraham, by the way, you 100%. You know what happened there, don't you? He insisted that Sarah would be better than Avram. It's interesting because she had a greater. But only once do we find that the women lost out on it. Where was that? Was Yitzchak had with his wife who davened? They didn't have children. Do you remember? They didn't have children, so they wanted to have children, and it was by unfortunately when they davened, it was if you remember that Rivka was the daughter of, what do you call him? I'm going crazy with names now. With his father. What was his father's name? Come on. Lavan. He was a rascal. And when they davened, what does the Torah say? That they both went to a room and davened. He went on one side, she went on another side. Whose prayers were answered? Yitzchak. Why? Because Lavan was a Rosha, and any woman who's brought up in the house of Roshas and becomes a tzaddikus, that's wonderful. That she knew she had to do this. But when you've got a tzaddik whose father's a tzaddik, and he's still able to go on to a higher level, then you know that's a greater gift. No matter how good you are, you still have to make the opportunity of raising yourself even more. So this is the blessing that the women have a great role to play. I promise you. Listen to your wife, because they don't ever think that they are, something. You find as well, by the way, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu also listens. Slavchad was given the praise. I told you this last week. Do you remember that by the Meraglim, we said we should have had the women should have done it because they showed their love for Eretz Yisrael, because they wanted a piece of land there. Again, the women got the praise for it. So don't ever estimate and say that people come along and say, oh, women, the second-class citizens, achas v'shalom. Please understand, you are a first class. You are equal, absolutely equal. Eza kenegdoi. You are a helpmate, kenegdoi, in order to be able to gain the leadership as well. So let's pray that the Kodesh Baruch Hu will give us a zechus, that we'll be able to find that we can live together. There's unity, not uniformity. We're all different, every one of us, but there has to be a unity of avodas Hashem. That's the seder this week of Korach. The Korach has to come along and say it has to be with the growth, because why? With the ending of, when the growth, can you see the miracle that when it's not just that they proved that the people, that Aaron was the leader, but look at the children, the fruit, the nuts, the growth. It was there. It was not just that person. It was what the children, it was the next generation and the next generation. And if you remember, I told you, the yichus is the one in the front of everybody. Aaron was the leader, but it would be his children who would pass it on to him. The ground almond, the ground nuts, proving that was the most important lesson of all. We should all be zoiche. Yes, sir.
Alan, so in your perspective, you're saying the woman is equal to the man.
Correct.
But in your perspective, it is different. It is the man is equal to the woman.
No,
I think it's an interesting point.
It's not the woman equal to the man. However, the reason being, a man is not equal to the woman because he's got more mitzvahs. She's equal to the man because it's the mitzvahs that she has to keep. It depends on the amount of mitzvahs. If you say the man is equal to the woman, then you wouldn't have to keep tefillin, tzitzis, etc. Whereas the woman has to keep the mitzvahs like the man. Although I must tell you, Rashi his wife wore tzitzis. Did you know that?
Yeah.
We don't need
both sisters.
Yeah, they both went tefillin. They don't need it.
The both daughters.
They've got their own. They've got enough to do. Let them actually, and that's why tonight when you say Eishes Chayil, the Eishes Chayil is the praise for Klal Yisrael. Okay, that's just for us. So let's say the zechus we're learning. It b'zchus Mr. Jacobs for your Rebbe Tzachon Livrocha. The zechus is that when you go to Kodesh Baruch Hu and she sees how she's able to bring children and grandchildren and all the zechusim, the zechusim are there. The Klal Yisrael. Ein ben Peres is mentioned because of his wife, because of the zechusim, and that's how we have to show the zechusim. Never ever think that they're immaterial just because they're put in a separate. You know something? I always say by a mechitza, the men are inside the cage, the women are outside. Look at it, and that's how you look at it. The women are outside, the men are in the cage looking in. So you go to a zoo. It's the men who are in the cage looking into the animals, and the women are looking out. People complain. So this is it. So look after Kodesh Baruch Hu. But that's the answer. Listen, have a lovely Shabbos. Next week,
Shabbos.
Next week we have to think of Shivas B'Tammuz, and we have to know the Segula of a Kodesh Baruch Hu again for Parnosa, for Gesund, etc. And let's hope in Mitzvah Hashem that all the things, all our tefillas should be answered for Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Shkoyach, Shabbos.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Thank you so
Eat
much.
what?
Have a lovely Shabbos. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Inga.
That's the
Shabbos.
socialist. The socialists. That's the Labour Party. Where in fact, you're right. That's for democracy. And 100% Hitler democracy. Oh, it was hypnotic glance. You know that. This was
Yeah.
a hypnotic glance. You know.
The approach of Korach, that we all equal and we all can be a leader, it made me think of like happenings of the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, where socialistic movement started. And
unfortunately, but do you see the danger?
yeah,
Because it's a hypnotic film. They're hypnotized by it. Mass hysteria is the word.
Yeah.
They think they're democratic, but they're getting nothing for it. They just have to follow the leader. They're not democratic. They'll have to do as they're told. Not democracy.
democracy can be useful, I believe, because then you at least know, because you have freedom of speech, and then you at least know what your opponent is thinking, where are people up to.
Yeah, but you haven't got freedom of speech. You're just following the leader who's got democracy. You haven't got it. That's the problem. Anyway, let's leave politics out of it. Let's enjoy Shabbos. Bye.
Shabbos.
Thank you so much. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Inga. Good
Good
Shabbos.
Shabbos, Eli.
Good Shabbos. Yes,
Shabbos, all of you.
everyone. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.